Friends, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, this little show that I do where I sit down and talk with other writers. And I know a lot of people have shows and podcasts where they talk to writers. I don't know if this is any different. I think it's different. I think it's good. I like the way that I do it. I tend not to focus on specific books by the people I'm interviewing, mostly because I don't have time to read all those books if I'm recording this once a week. But the reason I started Making It Up is that I wanted to talk to other writers. I like talking about writing. I like hearing about other people's experiences and their advice. And I feel like I always finish an episode and I'm like, oh, I just learned some cool stuff. So it's always an education for me. Hopefully it is for you as well. Before I get to today's guest, just a note that I've got a lot going on, and you can check some of that out in terms of my books, my podcasts, my newsletters, all that stuff's at carterwilson.com. I've got a pretty active YouTube channel where you can see episodes of this podcast amongst a lot of other things that I do, including motivations for writers, meditations for writers, general advice for writers, all that kind of good stuff. And then, of course, you can go to unboundwriter.com, the company I founded last year, about 18 months ago, where I do one-on-one coaching with clients, and you can sign up for a free consultation call for that. I also have self-guided online classes available for purchase. Great stuff about how to write from some of the masters out there. And I'm also usually putting on some kind of seminar or workshop retreat. I'm going to be doing something in Colorado probably pretty soon, a little how to write thrillers kind of a thing. So check that out. You can check the website to see all those dates, times, fun stuff. All right, so today on the show, I had Joe Hart. So Joe is a pretty recognizable name in the thriller / horror adjacent writing landscape. He's the author of 17 novels. He's Edgar winning author. He's also a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. And he's got 2 books coming out back to back, but the one that's in the thriller space is called I Become Her. That'll be out next week as I'm recording this. It'll already be out by the time you're listening to this. And then he's got another book from another publisher following up just the week after that. So he is a busy man. And we had a great conversation. I know of Joe. I've never talked to Joe as far as I know. Maybe we've met before. But, you know, and you'll hear in the episode, I was looking into him a little bit on his website. He's got kind of recommendations. And I'm like, I could have written this in terms of the books he recommends, the TV shows, the movies. And so I'm like, all right, we're going to have a connection. And we certainly did. And throughout the conversation, I kind of noticed all these things that we have in common in terms of what we enjoy. Also sounds like they apply to how we write, how we approach storytelling. We talked a lot about kind of how to write a dark story while still giving hope to the reader. So it's not just dreadful and depressing, but also not this Pollyanna happy ending either. And that just takes time. It takes a lot of hundreds of thousands of words to get to the point where you kind of learn that balance, and obviously a lot of feedback from agents and editors and beta readers and critique groups. So we've kind of had a similar path in terms of kind of getting that structure down. But yeah, very easygoing guy. Super dark little, very short story that we made up the end based on a sentence from a Karen Slaughter book. So all in all, pretty cheerful. I think you're going to like this one. This is my excellent conversation with Joe Hart. It's funny. I was looking at your bio, and what was interesting about your website was that you listed things that you recommend. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, did I write this? I mean, like not that these things are super like deep cuts. But The Road by Cormac McCarthy, you know, whenever I'm asked, I'm like, I think it's my favorite book of all time. It's so fucking dark and just ghostly written. And you read a book like that and you're like, I could never write like this. Like, I don't know something magical wrote this book.
Yeah, yeah, it's so singular. It's so singular. It's like I usually read it like once a year. I
Oh,
just return to it over and
yeah.
over, because it's just yeah, it's just really something. So yeah.
Cormac McCarthy, and certainly there's stuff of his that I don't care for or can't even
Mhm.
finish because
Yeah,
it is obtuse writing.
yeah,
But when you get to something like The Road that still has a lot of passages and you're like, I don't quite know exactly what he's saying here, but
right.
there's something about the lyricism of his writing that forces you to read every word, and it's exhausting, but it's also beautiful because
Yeah.
that's rare for me at least.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's probably part of one of the reason that I've read it so many times is like you say, you kind of eke out a little bit more meaning maybe each time the passages start to make a little bit more sense, or you'll see it in a different way, and it'll resonate with you. Versus the first time I read it was like 2000, 12 or something like
Right.
that, whenever. And then, but now 10, 12, 14 years later, then it's like something means a little different to you. So yeah, yeah, it's an incredible book. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
So
and there's something about his writing that I remember when I first read it. I was, I don't even know if I was published yet or not, but I was writing, and it kind of taught me that you don't have to always make sense. You don't have to have complete sentences,
yep,
but it can't
yep.
be forced. It has to be, or you could just tell it just came to him the way that he writes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it feels almost like transcribed, like it feels like one of those things that just kind of like came through. And yeah, I always try to tap into that when I'm writing. Is that
Right.
like what was it? Ray Bradbury had like the sign over his desk, like "Don't think,"
Right.
and and you kind of catch yourself sometimes, maybe thinking a little too much. But yeah, it's like when the words just suddenly kind of like beam in from
Right.
somewhere else, it's like, oh, I have to listen to that because I'm not sure exactly where that's coming from.
And don't you
Yeah.
find I mean, I think that listening to yourself, first of all, I think it's one of the hardest things for especially aspiring writers to do because you don't trust yourself because you're not published or whatever. You have all these insecurities. But the best writing, I think, comes from that subconscious state, even if it's been outlined. And that also allows you just to get the draft done.
Yeah.
So you're not
Yeah.
like going back and editing every 5 pages that you write. And it's, I think my experience is the more and more you write, the more and more that subconscious first draft is closer to the final product.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised by that. And maybe those magic words that come to you turn out to be shit and you have to go
Yeah.
delete them, but you get them down, right?
Right. At least they're there. That's exactly right. Yeah. And I've found the same thing. Like as I get older and the more drafts you write, yeah, that first draft is a little closer to where you want to be versus, 8 books ago, something like that. You had that first draft that maybe shifted quite a bit, but yeah, now
Right. And
it's
that
a little
for
closer.
even when it's closer to what you want it to be, it's still not done, right? I was
Yeah.
having this conversation yesterday and I'm like, I'll only do like 2 or 3 passes of it. And it's not being lazy. It is still this is the best of my ability, but I know
Right.
my agent's going to have tremendous insights. My
Right.
publisher is going to have tremendous things that I just can't see. So there is something almost freeing about knowing that, all right, I've taken it this far, but now I need help.
Right. Exactly.
Do
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
find that a lot? And Thomas and Mercer, I
Yeah.
think, you have you have at least 2 editors, right? Or how does it work for you?
Yeah, yeah, there's so many rounds of editing. I do usually one or two prior to even sending it to my editor or my agent, and then they come back. And I usually try to, I did it differently years ago, but now I try to kind of like combine everybody's notes at the same time,
Yeah,
when you get the feedback, because otherwise you're changing one thing and then switching it again, you get
right,
other feedback. So now it's like I let all that feedback come back in, and then a lot of times I'll cross-reference and be like, is somebody over here saying the same thing here? And it's
right,
like, okay, then that's something I need to pay attention to.
right,
And I think like authors, like in general, you always feel like where there's like a soft spot in the floor, so to speak,
right.
in the plot, and you're like, I'm not quite sure what's wrong here, but there's something wrong, and I need to fix it. And then if somebody else hits on it, you're like, okay, I need to go back and do that and stuff.
Totally.
But yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah,
along those same lines, I think when you're doing your own passes and you have that same sense, but you kind of know what's wrong and
yeah,
you're being a little lazy about it,
yeah,
and you're kind of
yeah,
saying like it's good enough, like she's good
yeah,
enough here. They
Yeah.
always catch you, and you're like, yeah,
Yep.
it's never. That's the hard. I think that's one of the hardest things about being a writer is that challenge to yourself of when you're editing to be just so focused and fully present and not do what you would do maybe at work where you're like it's good enough because
Right.
it's your
Right.
stuff and you get the instincts for it after a while, I think.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things like yeah, like you say, where you know it's that fine line between challenging yourself and then finally leaving it alone, you know, and
Yeah.
it's figuring out where that is. So
Right.
yeah, 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 it's a
Right.
challenge. Yeah.
And then also
Yeah.
looking at your recommended list, your first show you recommend is X-Files.
Oh yeah.
My dog is named Scully.
There you go. Nice.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
right. I actually behind me on my bookshelf, you're not going to be able to see them. I have little Mulder and Scully figurines
Yeah.
with a stretcher and an alien corpse
That's
from
so
I
cool.
probably
I
had
love it.
for 20 years. So
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I
awesome.
remember, of course, when we first watched that show, it's like you're waiting every week for it to come on, and
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how it holds up. Probably not great, but I just
Yeah.
remember it's something about the creativity of the show, not just the storyline,
Yeah.
but these one-off shows where all of a sudden Scully's on an abandoned like ship from the 40s, and I'm like,
Yeah.
they just went to did they just did whatever they wanted to do, and it was something so
Yeah.
cool about that.
It was, I feel like it was very much as far as the show was ahead of its time. You know, they took something that was, I think, hanging out there in the
Yeah,
atmosphere of that type of genre with aliens and monsters and all the spooky stuff and conspiracies, and they just had so much fun with it. And
totally.
sometimes, they knew exactly what they were doing. Sometimes they played it straight, and sometimes they knew, it was tongue in cheek and stuff. But yeah, no, that shows in my DNA for sure. It's
Right.
right in
And
there.
and and you mentioned Breaking Bad, and we're going to move on from all this pop culture stuff in a second, but I'm always felt like Breaking Bad. So Bryan Cranston did an episode of X Files, and that's how Vince Gilligan found him and cast him in Breaking Bad. And I'm like that, and
Um,
you just can't picture Breaking Bad without Bryan Cranston. Like that show wouldn't exist or wouldn't have been anything without
right,
him.
right.
And that's such a bold choice, and it ended up being just such a phenomenal show.
Yep, for sure, for sure.
Um, what is your background with writing? Was this something that you wanted to do all because you have a lot out, so you've been you either write tremendously fast or you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think I always wanted to be a writer. I never knew how I would be able to do it, was the challenge. Through high school, I started, writing little short stories on my mom's electronic typewriter when I was 9 or 10 years old. I started, just kind of knocking out little short stories, and then did longer works in high school, some poetry, and I had a great English teacher, and he really encouraged me and kind of focused, what talent I had at the time, um, and yeah, and pushed me and said, this is something you're good at. You can do this. I just never knew how to do it, and
Right.
I got into college, and I mentioned this to somebody the other day. It was like I took all the English lit classes I could and creative writing. And after a couple of years of that, I went to my guidance counselor there, and I was like, "What do I do here now?" And he's like, "Well, you want to be a journalist?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Do you want to teach?" I was like, "No." He's like, well, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I want to be a writer." He's like, "We don't have like a career path for that. Like, we don't have like some
Right.
guidance that, for what to do." I was like, "Oh man." So yeah, it took a while. It took a while, and I think it was like kind of when Kindle direct publishing came out is when I kind of caught wind of, this is maybe an outlet to start publishing some of my own stuff, because the traditional way of like trying to find an agent and submit, it just seems so daunting to me. I was
Yeah.
just overwhelmed by that. I thought, well, geez, I'll never get an agent. I'll never find a publisher, that
Yeah.
type of thing. So I just, yeah, I started self-pubbing, and from there, yeah, it was a few books in. I wrote my first thriller, and then a acquisitions editor from Thomas and Mercer reached out to me, and she's like, "I saw your book. I read it. I loved it. I think maybe there's, maybe a partnership here and whatnot." And
Wow.
Yeah, we just kind of went from there. Yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. I mean, and just going back to school, it's such a valid comment because if you make the decision, I want to be an engineer, there exists in the world jobs for engineers where they're looking for people, they'll pay you, they'll give you health insurance, and you can
yeah,
see that vision.
yeah,
And your guidance counselor, you can see their brain automatically goes to, okay, what's a paying job
yeah.
that's not just luck of the draw,
Right.
journalism, or
Yeah,
you could be a staff writer somewhere, people go into
yeah,
technical writing, whatever it is.
yeah,
And if you want to be a novelist, it's like that's on you. There's like you
yeah,
there's no career path.
yeah,
There's steps that you can watch other people take, but
yeah.
that doesn't mean, and you could be more talented than those people.
Right, right.
you
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
crazy. And
yeah.
what you write might be in next year, but not in 5 years from now.
Yep.
So it's scary, but it's also kind of fascinating that you were less intimidated by the entry of KDP when it first started than querying agents, because to me, that's very like, how do I do this? How does it look good? How do I get a cover that's going to mimic, what's out in the market right now? That seems like way more of an education than just trying to figure out how query letters work.
Yeah, and it's funny because like you say, it probably was at the time. It was like more in my head as far as it was probably easier to just figure out how to query
Totally.
and do those things. But to me, it was like, okay, well, here is like you said a little more step by step plan. I'd seen other authors that were doing it, and they were like, okay, this is you do your copy editing, and once you finish your manuscript, and then you find a cover artist, and it's easy to upload your manuscript, and then right away people can read it. And maybe it was kind of shortcutting a little bit of that blockade of publishing and whatnot. It was
Yeah.
attractive at the time, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think you're right. It's like there probably would have been like perfect your query letter. You
Right.
find the first best 50 pages that you can in your manuscript and send it off and get an agent.
But it's
So
almost like your brain went to that place of your career counselor. You're like, well, I can make this into a guaranteed type of job, at least in terms of getting my book out there. Because a lot of
yeah,
people who first started self publishing, and again, self publishing with Amazon back when you did it is very different than what it looks like today.
so different. Yeah,
Um, but if it sounds like the way I'm interpreting it, it wasn't so much of like, I have to have my work out there. People have to know I exist and love me. You're like, no, if I'm going to start making money on this soon, I got to put it out
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it was one of those choices where it seemed like a viable option. It was a way to get your
Totally.
work out there, and it didn't. Yeah, it was one of those things where, and I thought that too. I thought, well, I can write a manuscript, I can query agents, and I can wait and wait and wait to eventually get published. Maybe, maybe not. Or I can have my work out in readers' hands. And at the time, that was just so much more important to me to
Yeah.
just get the work out to people and they
Start
read it and
building a
then
name.
yeah, and start the career. So
Yeah, and it's shifted so much now, and I'd be curious to hear your take on it because if somebody's doing that today, and that's very common, by the way, I've written 3 books. I've been querying agents for 5 years. I haven't had any luck, so I'm starting to put them out as I'm still querying. Now it's a little bit more of like, my sense is you need to make a decision because if an agent finds you and you've already self-published, that can be a little bit more of a hill to climb than, an agent or an editor taking you on as a shiny debut and maybe they want to change your name. But how do you see that landscape today with that mindset?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. There's so much has changed. There's those. It's very strange to be like the different lenses, like you said, when you have maybe you have some a successful series or something like that. Well, that's completely different because yeah, an agent might come out of the blue or a publisher might come out of the blue and say, "Hey, I think we can partner up and you've got 100,000 TikTok followers or something," and that adds into the whole mix. There's all these factors to maybe getting picked up by a publisher. But yeah, I see so many really ambitious, fast writing, self-pubbed authors now who are putting out books, and it feels like that momentum and putting out so much work and putting lots and lots of time into advertising seems to be the course for self-pubbing now. And I think there has been a little bit more of a shift to going back to trying to find an agent and getting a
Mm.
publisher and trying to get your book into bookstores. And I think it's common like anything else. There's those waves, you know. And
Yeah.
in 10 years, then self-pubbing might be this whole kind of boutique thing again, and it might,
Right.
be a little different. And so it just feels like it shifts back and forth. But
Yeah,
you know,
I think you're right that it does. And we are definitely seeing a trend. So your example where Thomas and Mercer was aware of a self-published book that was doing well and wanted to bring you on. I think we're not seeing that so much in our genre anymore. I think what you're seeing is people, to your point, people who all of a sudden have this massive social media outreach and are writing fantasy, romantasy,
yeah,
horror to a degree. I think, and become very successful self-published that way. And those are the things that are all of a sudden an agent or a publisher can look at Book Talk and be like, this thing's on fire. If we took
yeah.
this on, it's going to be easily be a New York Times bestseller.
Yep, yep, it's going to be a hit. And that's, the wave of and the rise of social media has shaped like everything in the world. It's shaped so much of the publishing industry too, which is I know it just goes with the territory. It just is what it is. But
Right.
it's a little disheartening when you see, I mean, I don't have a lot of followers
Right.
online or
Me
anything like
neither.
that. It's like I focus so much of my attention and energy on the work and
Right.
just creating something new and better and new idea and things like that. I'm terrible at marketing. I'm terrible at social media.
Yeah.
I try to communicate with people, but and there's some people that are just really, really good at it. And they
Yeah.
might, like you said, they might put out a great book too. So then that's a great winning combination for them. But
Right.
yeah, it's a brave new landscape out there for authors, especially nowadays coming on. It's like it must feel just absolutely overwhelming to be like, oh, should I be on Blue Sky? Should I be on Twitter? Should I be on
Totally.
TikTok? Should I, it's
Right.
really something.
And how curated should my content be? And I think
Yeah.
right. And I'm actually going through this kind of metamorphosis right now, or maybe a growth in that kind of almost from the angle of a fear of AI,
Yeah.
and a fear of just a flood of shit coming
Yep.
into the publishing landscape. And I'm very grateful that I've, kind of established myself before all of this. So you have a
Yeah.
name, but I see social media now, particularly, unedited video content being, this
Yep.
is your opportunity to show people your personality, your presence,
Yep.
because it's all going to get lost in the mix otherwise.
Yeah.
So it is an opportunity, but it's also a lot of work. And if that work is taken away from the quality of your writing, because I'm sure there are book talk books that just blow because
Yeah.
they're known as an influencer, but their book is terrible, but it becomes a bestseller.
Yeah.
But does it resonate enough for people to buy books two, three, four? Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. It's really something like you said. It's a strange thing to have to. It's you. I think we were always aware that you have to be available to push your book in some way, shape, or form. Do interviews, the book tour. Like I mean that, but those were kind of like heralded like up high on the shelf when you think about publishing, especially 10, 15 years ago. You think
Yeah,
about, oh, I'm going on a book tour, like meeting people at libraries and bookshops and things like that, and signing books and stuff. That feels very baked in and genuine to the experience of being an author. And
totally.
now so much, yeah, it's just so much online. It's an online presence and posting enough content every day to stay in the stratosphere. And
Right.
it's a different world. Yeah.
Right, because those things that you're talking about in terms of the tours, they only happen around the launch of the book. So if you're,
Yeah.
I'm a book a year guy, but then that's me writing. That's not necessarily fitting with the publishing schedule. So I had a book come out in January and my next one won't be out until November of 26. So I'm like, all right, I've got time to fill. I've got to make
Yeah.
sure, of course I'm writing the next books, but I've got to make sure I'm maintaining relevancy after that
Yeah.
as well. And it's tough, and you have to kind of like doing that stuff. You have to be able to meet people and do public
Yeah.
speaking and things like that because people remember that, don't they?
They do. I think and I'm so different as a reader. I care very little as far as maybe the author's online personality or like how
Right.
much influence they
Me
have.
too.
If I open a book and it just carries me away, then I make it a point to go on social media and at least tell them if they're on social media, and tell them, hey, I loved your book. It was great. It carried me away. It was wonderful. I'm a weirdo as far as like kind of like that anti technology type thing, but it's a little refreshing when I read a book and I finish it and I go online
You
and the
can't find
person
them.
doesn't have can't find them. I'm like, you're my person,
I
That's
know.
it's kind of funny, but
I know, and it was what's fun for me. And actually, I read mostly nonfiction, unless I'm blurbing or whatever. And I might read a book that I'm like, this book blew me away, and then say, hey, do you want to be on Making It Up? And then I get to have a conversation like this where I'm like, all right, now I get to meet this person and I get to kind of fan out a little bit,
yeah,
because I have such an appreciation for how hard it is to write nonfiction. But
yeah.
I think the other thing, going back towards touring and marketing yourself, we both, because I know this is how we got connected through Megan Beatty,
Mhm.
hire our own external PR firms to work in tandem with our publisher's PR arm. Um, and I think a lot of people don't realize, like, not that you have to do that, but
Yeah.
if you're going to sit there and think even the biggest publishers in the world are going to shout to the moon about your book, that's a pretty rude wake up call, I think.
Yeah, it's so strange. I was talking with my wife the other day about how books still become even, I hate to use the word bestseller, but how they become kind of buzzy and they
Yeah,
come out and they get some traction. It just still seems to be so much word of mouth. It seems to
oh
be
my
so
God,
much
I
of
couldn't
that.
agree with you more. Yeah.
It's organic. It's people talking about a book, and where they talk, I guess, is just, they talk to their friends online. They might call somebody on and they'll say, oh, this is what I'm reading right now, or they have a book club, however it gets spread. But when a person that you know, trust, love, whatever says, oh, this book is just awesome, I just finished it, that's the biggest thing that I'll be interested in. I have people that I trust that I really, we share the same tastes and different
Yeah,
things like that, and they'll be like, oh, I think you'd really like this. And it's like hand selling books still seems to be the best way to create that buzz and whatnot. And
totally.
if I can, and like this, like having conversations about writing and about books in general, if that kind of interests people, and then they say, okay, well, that was an interesting interview or a conversation that I had with that person, maybe I'll see what they have to say in the fiction world, and
Right.
what they can actually do. So yeah, it's that aggregate. It just kind of keeps piling on, and you gain that critical mass, and then hopefully your book does well when it comes out. So
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree with you more. And I'm a data guy, so I always like to see the evidence of how do I prove this. And of course, word of mouth is not something you can prove. But
no.
so my 10th book came out this year and
Oh,
it became a legit breakout, like unlike that I'd
nice.
ever had before. And you look at the process getting up to it, and I'm like, oh, the two PR teams had the same similar outreach to early influencers and things like that, had a lot of people reading it. But this one just resonated more.
Yeah.
And so and I mean, multiples and multiples of sales more than what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And you ask people like who were agnostic readers, what did you like about it? And you're like, I just realized that it just hit for whatever reason, and then
Yeah.
that makes them want to spread the word. And I
Yeah.
think that as frustrating as that sounds, because it's kind of there's no methodology and it's opaque, it also takes the pressure off. It's like
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do except for your minimum job, which is to write a great book.
Yep.
That's the minimum we have to do, and I'm always saying that. And it's just whether or not everyone else thinks it's great or not. that's
Yep.
that's where you roll the dice.
That's right. That's exactly it. And that's what I've always like lived by is the best form of marketing is just producing more work, is because you just never know, like you said, when that next idea is going to resonate with readers and it's just going to catch fire.
Yeah, yeah,
And not every book will do that. You might write a book that is, kind of niche, or it does okay, but then yeah, you might hit on something and it just catches so many people's attention. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah, just got to keep working,
You got to keep working and learning and listening, and not compromising. I find when I'm approaching a thriller and I don't know the plot, and I think that's helpful because I think for the or at least the thrillers I read, the ones that are the most resonant, the ones I'm going to be thinking about 3 weeks after I'm done with it, are the ones where I had a kind of an emotional connection rather
Mhm.
than, oh my God, that was such a highly structured, good plot with a great plot twist. Again, going back to Breaking Bad, Walter White, the whole plot is amazing, but you connect because you're like, I could be this guy. He's doing this
Mhm.
desperate thing for a good cause and he's becoming corrupt by it.
Yep.
And you remember the show because of him, not because of all the different layers of the plot, in my opinion.
Right, right. 100%. And that's what I constantly structure my books around my characters
Yeah.
is because I mean, I think they're obviously the most important part of the story. They're the people, they're the ones making decisions. And like you say, they're the ones that you will remember or relate to. They'll say something that is so relatable in a book,
Yeah.
and that will just stay with you. And then, yeah, you become invested. You want to see them either succeed or not succeed. And I just find them the most obviously intriguing part of the story, but probably the most important because it's almost like they're interchangeable. Plot is character, character is plot. It just
Right.
kind of mixes back and forth. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Right. But the emotion has to be there. And I think we're in this world now as, I don't know if you would describe yourself as thriller blending with horror. Um, I know a lot of people describe me that way.
Mhm.
More, dark thrillers, but certainly not gratuitous violence, but just really full of dread.
Yep.
Um, that's hot right now for
Mhm.
whatever reason. Maybe because the world is full of dread and people are at least can read this, and be like, well, at least it's not that bad.
Right. Yeah.
um,
It's
but
it's a
do you
weird
do you feel
thing.
that that's kind of a big thing right now?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot of times it's counterintuitive, right? When there's the most darkness in the world that people would want to experience even more darkness in their fiction, and I think it vacillates. You have
Yeah.
people that want escapism where it's, oh, I want a rom-com and I just want to unplug and watch something happy and feel good for a while. But you're right, I think they also want to dive into something, and it's a little bit of a cathartic experience to experience this other darkness, but it's safe.
Right.
I can close the book, I can set it down, I can be done with it, I can finish it. And it's maybe, yeah, maybe a little bit of that like control over a situation that
Right.
feels like you don't have any control over the world and things that are happening, but you have control over what you're reading, and you can experience it and process it in your own way. And then when you're done with it, you can set it aside. So yeah, I think
Totally,
there's a little bit of
totally.
that. Yeah.
And I think it's still a balancing act. I was having this conversation with another writer the other day who writes very dark stuff. And there's got to be, because it is cathartic, but if you read a whole book that's just heavy and depressing and dark and you finish it, you're just kind of like, oh,
Yep. Yep.
there's got to be not a happy ending.
Yep.
But there's got to be some layer of hope in there where all of a
Yep.
sudden then maybe that juxtaposes to the world. You're like, okay, we went through all
Yes.
this and they weren't good, all good at the end, but there was hope. And
Yep.
there's something about that. And I know American audiences maybe require that more than like British audiences who are totally fine with just things never being hopeful.
Yeah. It's bleak. Yeah. 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 I agree. I think there does need to be that. Even if the character doesn't triumph, it's that they tried, and
Right.
and even if they didn't make it all the way through to the end, because you see some of that, things don't work out. You
Yeah.
lose people. I mean, this is,
Right.
real life is like that. So it's if but yeah, no one wants to walk away from the book going, this
Right.
is such a downer. I don't
Right.
ever
Right.
want to read them again. Yeah.
But that I think that takes hundreds of thousands of words to figure out that balance because I got an agent with my first book, but my first three didn't sell. And when I went back and went through all of my rejections from these editors, I started to see the thread of your heroes aren't strong enough. And I remember thinking I always push back against that concept because that to me is boring. Uh,
Mhm.
but then I started to realize like, well, strong can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I like the idea of an everyday person having this stuff thrown at them and then they
Mhm.
fail a lot along the way. But if you do that too
Yeah.
much, people are going to be like, "Oh my God, like this guy's
Yeah.
lame."
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't,
Yeah.
but if they come out guns blazing, that's not interesting either. And that took me so many books to figure out that balance of I have the fight in me. I am going to try, and I might get the shit beat out of me a few times, and I might not survive, but I'd rather be dead than accept what is happening.
Yeah.
And that's the balance that's hard to strike. But once you do, you're like, okay, that's what I think. That's what people. That's what I enjoy, at least.
It is. I'm the same boat. It's when I think about that type of thing, I think of my novel Or Else, because I had the character who was a mid-list thriller writer who finds himself embroiled in basically a mystery thriller plot.
Hmm.
And he's right in the middle of it, and he's like, it's a little meta because he's like, this isn't anything like I've written,
Right.
but I'm doing my best to be as smart as, my detectives that I've written and stuff. But it's that realization that the real world isn't the same as books, and you do, like you said, you fail, you fall down, you don't get everything right. I had a little feedback, which was funny, which I was expecting it, but it's like that was purposeful. Like people would come and they'd be like, "Well, geez, he
Hmm.
didn't like fix everything. He didn't figure it out, and he didn't do all these things like." And it's like, no, he's not Rambo and he's
Right.
not, John
Right.
Wick and he's not these people. He's an average guy that he's just trying to do the best he can. And that's the way I approached writing it, was like, what would I do if, somebody I cared about
Totally.
disappeared? How would I approach this? That was the fun of the novel. So
Right.
yeah,
What lines am I willing to cross? And you really, and I think that's important. You really do think about that. You think about, you know, we all say, of course we would kill if this happened.
yeah,
And then if you really take that thought into a story you're writing and you really think about it, you're like, this would be really devastating to do. I would still probably
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
But here's the, and that to me, that's one of the most important parts of the book is not having violence occur even all that often. But when it does, it is real and it is meaningful and it is consequential. And
yeah.
you kill somebody, it doesn't end there.
No,
There's a lot to do,
yes, yeah,
and what that does psychologically to you, even if it's the person who is trying to harm you or your family.
yeah.
I think it's important to explore all that stuff and not be kind of trite about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's being like you said, as true to life as possible, as realistic. So there is that resonance when somebody reads it. I always go back to so many of the Coen brothers films where you have
Yeah,
all these characters that are larger than life, or that you're so invested in them and you're going along with this great story and plot, and then there is just like hyper violence all of a sudden,
yeah,
and they just do it so well. Like
right.
every time I think of a lot of times when I think of like a violent scene or something, I'll revisit some of their movies and just watch how they approach violence and the lead up to it and the aftermath and the moment, and just how quickly things escalate or can happen. Just
Right.
feels so very much. It feels very visceral, but feels very true to life too. So yeah,
Right. And it's very dissonant because that violence usually is coming off of a scene that's probably hysterical
yeah,
in its own darkness. Yeah, I'm the exact same way. I channel the Coen brothers quite a bit, and sometimes it gets me into trouble because I've had manuscripts where I've gotten feedback from my editor saying this just feels a little bit too almost masculine
mm,
in a way for a domestic thriller because I have these kind of quirky, almost gangsterish elements in
sure.
it. But that's what I gravitate to as a viewer, for
Yeah,
example. Um,
yep.
and then so your next book is out like next week, right? I become her.
Yeah, yep, yeah. Next Tuesday, yeah, week from Tuesday.
And
So
does that get old? Having a whole
have
book launch, is it as exciting as ever?
it is. It's like what you were saying. There's a lot of times now I have more space between books coming out.
Yeah.
It's really weird this time specifically because I Become Her coming out next Tuesday, and then a week after that I have a gothic thriller coming out through my other publisher. So it was just the way the layers and the work and how the timing happened that now I have two books coming out within a week of each other.
Wow.
So that's the first time it's ever happened, but so it'll be interesting. But yeah, no, it's I always you get that same excitement when it's finally time. It's Christmas morning and your book's going out and you get to hear what people think about it and
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
everything. So yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
obviously, leading up to it, you're seeing early reviews, trade reviews, Goodreads
Mhm.
reviews, things like that. So you get a little bit of a finger on the pulse. But there's something about when it comes out, whatever launch event you do, if you do one, to kind of celebrate it. Um,
Yep.
but it does kind of quickly go like, all right, I got to get back to work.
Oh, it's so yeah. That's what I've learned over the years is are these little things that authors get. Like you get your deal, like when you get your deal summary in like Publishers Weekly or something, when you get a new deal, like enjoy that, share
Right.
that,
Opening
enjoy
the
it.
arcs, your box of arcs.
Yes, you get your arcs. Yeah, the early reviews. You get a nice review somewhere. Share that. Your launch date. You're right because it's the half life is so short. It just pretty soon you're like, well, that's over,
Right.
and you just got to move on to the next thing. Which is
Right.
so yeah. So it's little bits of joy and soak that in
That's
and
what
stuff.
keeps you
So yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Joe, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our own storytelling. So this is the making it up portion of the show. So I basically have three books that I chose at random off my
Okay,
bookshelf.
okay.
We're going to pick a book, pick a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that'll be the first sentence and maybe a 2 minute long short story. So I'll read that
Ooh,
sentence. You give me a sentence. So it's just improv. I do a sentence,
okay.
and then it's going to go off the rails very quickly. It'll probably get dark very quickly. It almost always does.
Okay.
So I've got Karen Slaughter's This Is Why We Lied. I just
Okay.
interviewed her 2 days ago at a hotel ballroom, and she was hysterical.
Oh, cool.
Please Don't Lie by Christina Baker Klein and Ann Burt. And Jeffrey Convitz's The Circus of Satan.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
choose one of those.
Oh, let's go with Karen Slaughter.
Okay, so give me a page number between 1 and 450.
Let's see. Let's go 250.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly scan page 250 to find a sentence that'll work. Um, let's see here. All right, here we go. You can just do whatever you want with this. This character's name is Mercy. There was debris under Mercy's fingernails.
She could see it from the light coming into the window in her bedroom as she woke up, and she had no idea how it had gotten there.
She kept her eyes closed, or she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, knowing that was the only thing that was going to still her fight or flight instinct. And then in that breath, she noticed the scent.
It was the smell of blood, a lot of it. And that's when she asked if her husband could smell it too, and he didn't answer.
She opened her eyes, the ceiling white and blank above her. All she wanted to do was keep her gaze fixed straight up. But as the tangy and coppery smell soon began to overwhelm her, she knew she would have to turn her head eventually.
When she did, the bed was empty. Kevin, she said. Still no answer. The bathroom door was open, and she thought that's where the smell was coming from.
I think we end it there because I think that's going to be a horror show in that bathroom.
It's not good, whatever's going on in there. Something bad.
Poor
Something bad.
Kevin. Poor
Yeah.
Kevin and his proclivity for prostitution finally caught up with him.
Something happened to Kevin. It was
Oh,
not
there's the
good.
title right there.
Yeah.
Something happened to Kevin.
Something happened to Kevin. Yep. There you go. Yeah.
Hey man, it was great talking to you. Are you
Yeah.
going to the BoucherCon conference at all? Do you go to those things?
I have in the past. I haven't recently. Kind of depends
Yeah,
schedule wise and stuff
totally.
and where it's going on. And I don't know where it is this
It's New
year.
Orleans. Yeah, in a few
It's New
weeks.
Orleans again. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yep. So I went I think the last time I was in New Orleans like a few years ago and stuff, and it
Okay.
was a blast and
Yeah,
whatnot.
it's
But
always
yeah,
a
I'm
good
not
time.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah, not going this year, but yeah,
All
I
right. And do
probably
you
will in
normally go to
future.
Thriller Fest, or
I've never been to Thriller
you've never
Fest.
been to Thriller
No,
Fest?
I've
Okay.
never been.
You
Yeah.
should go.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's such a good community.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I've heard good things. I have a couple friends that always
yeah.
go and stuff. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, and it's
Yeah.
what I like about it is it's a writers conference. It's not a fan conference. It's like that's where you can really connect with your people and, nurture those relationships and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
I've always loved it.
Cool.
Um, well, congrats on the two books coming out in the next couple of weeks. You've
Yeah,
got
thanks.
a lot going on and writing as well. So congrats on
Yeah.
everything, and it was
Yeah.
fantastic to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, it was great. It was great to hang out and chat and yeah, great conversation. So
All right.
appreciate it.
Take
Yeah.
it easy, man.
All right, you too. We'll see you.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Joe Hart. Make sure to check out his newest thriller, which is I Become Her, that is out in August of this year. And you can go check out all of his books and everything about him at joehartbooks.com. And that's HART. And then pop on over to carterwilson.com to check out my books and anything you want to know about me. And if you're interested in writing advice, coaching, online classes, retreats, simply go to unboundwriter.com and you can see my current list of offerings for all those things. And that's it. That wraps up this episode of Making It Up. Of course, I'm very grateful to all of you who are watching and or listening. We'll have another episode out just next week. In the meantime, take care.